Hey everyone, it's Scott from Heroic Studios Gaming coming at you with another video. I was trying some new audio settings, and so it took me a second to get things started. But hey, how's it going? Today I'm just going to do a brief video. I did a video on Rebel Rising, which, you know, as you have seen, I wasn't too impressed with that. So I decided to go ahead and read another thing in the Star Wars universe just to sort of like make up for it, because I don't usually like doing like negative reviews. So today I'm going to talk to you about the comic story called Hope Dies. Hope Dies is a collection of Star Wars annuals that took place between 2015 and 2019. It was quite interesting. It was the story about the rebels being sort of screwed over by a particular group of people that they thought they were helping. Essentially, it's like a double cross. Vader has this idea of how to like ruin or how to destroy the hope for the rebels, and he sort of executes his plan, but we don't find out about that until like a little bit later. We do find out about like the double cross, the sort of like book one, so it's not like a super surprise. But this is like a trade paperback, so it's a collection of stories, right? But in the first comic, we find out about the double cross, and then we find out more about the motivation behind it. Just my hair's all weird. But it's a very good story where we find out that like hope can die essentially for the rebels, except that it doesn't die. It's kind of a weird one. But we get to see it happens between the movies New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and so it's like this interesting sort of older story. And it's like the rebels sort of taking on a bunch of the like Empire ships in space. It's pretty good. There's a couple of like pros and cons about the story. It is pretty tightly written, and so it's really interesting because like the solutions to their problems involve sort of forgetting and like not leaning on their technology, because the double cross involves like hacking essentially. So you can't trust the technology that they just installed in all their cool like starships and stuff, because it's turning against them essentially. They're being hacked. And stuff like that, and the solution to that is pretty interesting. But they have to like use some old school techniques to do stuff, which is where sort of Han and Chewbacca come in, because they're more old schooly, and they also weren't part like of this whole thing, and they also didn't want to get anything retrofitted under their the Falcon. So it's pretty interesting in general. Like how they sort of go about solving it. But then we also have this interesting side of like the people like Luke and Leia and stuff that aren't super trained. It's not the characters we knew from like the movies later on, because they're earlier on. The only downside to the story, or the upside, is we get introduced to a few other characters too that are actually quite important to the story. But the only downside to this book was, well, the last story should have not been included. It should have been more succinct grouping of stories. It was weird that they included it. But because it was like unrelated, it was like the next circle like arc, so like I'm kind of confused. But anyway, but the other thing was that like after the first one, so in the second and onward of the story, they reference Jyn Erso and Rogue One like in every issue at least once, and it's very weird. And I'm guessing that it was because it came out the same time that like Rogue One had come out, so they wanted to like tie it back in and make sure everyone knew that this was like something that was sort of all linked in the universe. But they reference her a lot. Like they name the squadron of X-wings that manages to escape to go fight the Empire, the Rogue Squadron, in reference to her, and they actually say that. They're like, we're gonna call ourselves Rogue Squadron because we're heroes like Jyn Erso. So Jyn Erso, and that's like what they do. And then there's like a guy who sacrifices himself because he was like, I feel bad that I was the one who told Jyn that she couldn't do it. And it's like weird. It was like a weird amount of references to this particular event that happened in Rogue One. But it felt like they were like, hey, we're going to do a callback to something, even though it was completely unrelated, aside from it being a seemingly no-win situation, a semi-Kobayashi Maru, essentially. Aside from that, there was like really no reason for it to reference it. So that was weird. That was real weird for me to like just keep coming across it like randomly. But otherwise, it was really good. And like, there's stuff like, if your communicators can't communicate, how do you communicate with everyone else? Like, what do you do? And they have to address that in a way. They end up like, like there's some stuff they end up dealing with it in a very old school way, like, you know, throwing somebody out of an airlock kind of business. Yeah, like it's like old school. But then like, there's also a minute where a certain individual ends up stealing a TIE fighter and is escaping from the Empire ship with the codes that they need to like get back on like their way. to like escape this whole business. And they steal a TIE fighter, and then there's this situation of like there's a bunch of X-Wings and a bunch of TIE fighters flying around. How does this one TIE fighter manage to not get shot by their friends on the way back to bring the safe codes that will save everyone? So pretty interesting. And there's some of the hand wavy force business that happens there, but it's a good story otherwise. So I do actually give it 2 thumbs up. And so this is like the reverse to Rogue One's, or the Rebel Rising prequel book to Rogue One, by a sequel book to Rogue One, essentially, where they reference it so many times that I feel like they were like specifically wrote this series to sort of bring back something, but they did it in a bad way. Like if it had been a little bit of a different situation, I could have understood it, but this was not quite the same situation. This was like a complete double cross, and they were all getting sort of blown out of the sky. They were basically target practice, so it was a bit different, but for some reason they're like, this is just like that, and I'm like, well, but it's not though, so that seems weird that you guys keep referencing that. It honestly, like even for somebody, like it just felt weird. Like it was like shoehorned into the story, like almost like the editors or like the publishers were like, you have to mention Jyn Erso at least once in each issue or something like that. And that was the feel to it. Like, okay, we're just gonna be like, somebody just suddenly goes for Jyn, like randomly for some reason, even though it had nothing to do with what they were doing, like that kind of thing. All right, so that's it for me. Just a quick little, like just as quick as the other one, I'm going to do a quick little thing about how much I liked this one. This was a good story. And then we'll get right back to normal business a little bit later. So anyway, that's it. I just want to share that with you guys. So have a good day.